I'm Em,
And I'm Lex.
and we're thrilled to welcome you to the Ready, Set, Coach podcast.
Now, we're not just your hosts. We're also mamas, entrepreneurs, coaches, friends, and co-founders of the Ready, Set, Coach community.
What began as a pandemic side hustle has blossomed into a vibrant online community crafted by coaches for coaches.
So when we're not immersed in our coaching community on Circle, we're busy managing our other businesses, navigating the ups and downs of life, and of course, recording this podcast.
This is where we dive deep into epic conversations about life, business, coaching,
and everything in between.
So are you ready, Lex?
I'm set, Em.
Let's coach.
Hi, Em.
Hi, Lex. You beat me to it.
And hi, Colynn.
Hello, how are you guys doing today?
We're good. I have a case of the Fridays on a Thursday. What about you?
I have the same. I don't know how it's already Thursday, but I'm ready for it to be Friday. I keep thinking it's Monday, but this week has just been really busy. So.
What is time? It is
That's exactly every day, right?
The short days, the short weeks feel longer, the longer weeks feel shorter. It's a hot mess express sometimes. So I get it. Lexi, you had a big week.
Did I?
I
I
did.
I
You
did.
did.
I rebranded my agency. Is that what you're talking about? And had a photo shoot? Oh, I did those
Yeah.
two things, which was really cool. And before we talk about those brands, what I do want to talk about, well, we're not going to talk about those brands, but thank you for making me feel acknowledged and seen and heard. I love you. We know Colynn, guys. Obviously, she's on this podcast right now. We know Colynn through Ready, Set, Coach. Again, obviously, because she's on this podcast right now. But I want to go back and Colynn, how did we enter each other's lives? What was actually, do you even know the Meet Cute?
Yeah, actually, I had met Emily through another coaching program, and I went to some of her second degree society events, and then you guys had started Ready, Set, Coach, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I had seen some of your content too, Lex, and I was like, I want to know both of them. So then I joined it and was in your first cohort.
Yeah, you were in our very first cohort, which we haven't changed much from it, except now that you can. Yeah, we've changed a lot. We've changed a lot. What have we changed, Lex?
We don't have it anymore. We
Oh, yeah.
retired the group cohort and we put all the content into what is now our passive Ready, Set, Coach launch pack. But Colin was in the very first cohort, which I believe and Emily believes that any first iteration of anything, especially with a group, should be also a form of co-creation. So while
Mhm.
Emily and I set the container and obviously had the teachings laid out, Colin really was such a key part in helping us evolve the program and the community to where it is today.
And it's so
Oh, I
cool.
love that.
Well, I was going to say on a personal side too, I think we were all pregnant around the same time. So we all were, while we were birthed Ready, Set, Coach, we were also growing eyeballs. And that was pretty neat to see us all give birth, I think, within like months of each other.
No,
Colin,
I know. I think
are you
I think
first?
Lex announced that she was pregnant in the cohort one week, and then the next week I announced that I was pregnant to everyone. So it was really cool.
I can't remember if Ashlyn came first or your son came first.
I think Ashlyn is like, what is she, March? She'll be
March
2 soon.
29.
He's
Yeah.
April 13th. So
Okay, we're 2 weeks. I think we're 2 weeks to the day. Yeah.
I think
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Such a small,
Crazy.
so funny. It was very fun. Well, we're so happy to have you 4 years. Oh my God, 5 years. No, what years? 3 years. 3 years later. I was like, how many years has it been? Math is really hard today, guys. My brain is on the mushier side. So Colin, before we dive too deep, asking you deep questions, we would love to know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I started my law firm for female founders back in 2021, and then I also have another company that is a legal education company for female founders. It's basically, most of you, I'm sure you both know that there's just a huge gap kind of in the support that women need legally. Most people just don't have, that basic just legal knowledge that lawyers have. That's why we're lawyers. So I kind of started that to make sure that everyone did have access to the legal tools and education that they needed to get started. So I have a contract template. She's legit. My other company is a legal education company where I sell contract templates. I'm going to do an online course at some point, but I haven't gotten there yet because I also am the mother of a 2-year-old and a dog mom. So
So you're not busy at all is what
yeah,
I'm
no, not at all.
basically.
So Colin is been integrated with Ready Set Coach in so many ways. You heard about the cohort. She's also a wonderful friend. We've also hired her. And
Yes.
Colin, what did you do for Ready Set Coach?
I helped you guys with your trademark search, which is what you do before your trademark application. And then once that came back clear, sorry, I'm getting my hands all in the camera here. Once that came back clear, we did your trademark application and ultimately it registered. So congratulations, you both now own your brand. So you don't have to worry about any of the rebranding or things that come along with that. So that's one thing that I love doing for my clients because then they know they own everything that they've invested in, won't have to go back and redo. So super excited for you guys and it's just great.
It's a scary, I thought, Lexi, I mean, I think we've talked about it once or twice on a podcast, one of our podcasts, but I feel like the trademark process was an intimidating process and you made it so digestible and like I felt so supported. We both felt so supported and so guided, but B, I didn't realize how much of a waiting game is involved with trademarking. Like I always thought it was something you can just go online, you hit apply for a trademark, pay a bunch of money, and bada bing, bada boom, you got a trademark. But I feel like we waited, what, 8 months, a year?
I think it was it's usually a little over a year because it takes a while from the time you do the application for someone like them to assign an examiner at the USPTO. So, and then it has to go through all the other processes before actually being registered. So it does take some time for sure.
For Lexi and I, it was like our engagement period where we were like, oh my God, do we still want to get married? Like, is this going to happen?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely like a huge waiting game. So that's why we like being there too, being like, hey, we haven't heard anything yet, but this is normal. We'll let you know as soon as we do. And then, obviously if things do come up, we're there as well. So, but usually when you do hire us or another attorney, you'll know if there will be any issues with your application that need to be dealt with during the process. So
And this is like a verbal reminder for me and both of you and everyone to hold me accountable. I need to add the gosh darn TM to our name and logo. We have it.
Yes.
For
And
crying out
actually, you
loud.
can add the R now too, but sometimes people just use the TM, but you can add the R because that means that you're actually registered. So
is that more legit?
Yay.
First question, is
Yeah.
that more legit? Is she's legit? I'm more legit. We're more
Yes.
legit.
Yep. It just says basically that you have registered your trademark. So they can go look it up and that they can't steal it from you.
So what if someone tried to steal it? What would we do?
You would usually, it depends on the situation, but usually what happens, the first step is sending a cease and desist letter, just saying, hey, and you do need to protect it while you are, like after you have the trademark registered, it has to be protected. So you need to make sure that you're monitoring that if there are other people using the mark, and you need to send the cease and desist letter. So a lot of times people will be like, I can't believe that big company sent this little company a cease and desist letter, but it's because they have to keep their trademark rights. So that's
really?
also important to know for after you have a trademark registered that.
Like if we don't pursue people, we could lose our trademark?
Yes. And it again, it depends. I know it's such a lawyer answer, but that's why it's important to consult with a lawyer on these things because you just have to make sure that everything's in place and everything just really does depend on the situation. So
Colin, when you go out in the world, can you like enjoy yourself or do you see everything through a lawyer lens?
Sometimes I can enjoy myself. Sometimes it's really hard because you are like trained. I'm getting better. Starting my own thing has helped me with a lot of the mindset things, but you're trained to see the worst case scenario for people. And at my former job, I did insurance claims, and some of them were for businesses. And we had to basically what we did for the insurance company and the client is wrote them reports saying like, this is the worst thing that could happen. And we had to tell them the worst thing that could happen because they had to be advised of like their rights. And that's kind of what I do now too. But it was like every day writing reports, just saying, this is the worst case. And if you don't do X, Y, and Z, and you hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you don't tell people the consequences, they don't necessarily understand. So yes, it is. Sometimes I go out and I'm like, oh, that's such a liability, or like,
And
We
you would
were
never know that because you're such a positive, happy person. You're like sunshine, like
oh, thank you.
in a human form.
Oh,
So yeah.
100% agree. I just want to share, I was in Mexico last week with my son and my husband and his brother and sister-in-law, his wife, words. And we went on a cenote tour. So like you jump in these little caves in the middle of nowhere. And Jackson, my son, who's 2 years old, was allowed to go in. And I was like, this would be such a no-no in the US. I didn't sign anything. They just handed us, there was no like, no liability in case your kid can't swim, or just like double checking that people can swim before they do it. And then similarly, we went on a boat that was like, go find the man on the beach in the boat that says the thing, and got on a boat with a kid. And, I'm on the boat and I'm like, this is fascinating. Like, we didn't do any research on this company. It's kind of beautiful in those moments too, where you're just like, I survived and here I am to tell the tale, but also in the middle of the ocean, you're like, huh, like, was this smart?
Liability.
And was this
Yeah, I think about that now, especially like when I used to travel by myself, I'd be like, it's fine. But traveling with my son, I'm like, is it safe to like rent a boat and like go in another country? I don't know. Apparently, apparently it is. So
you need a car
now I
seat?
know.
Speaking
Optional.
of
Everything. Nah, no, I was gonna just say everything's optional in every other country. America is like overly litigious, I think.
Yeah.
we're extremists. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, I don't know, we kind of already transitioned. Here's my transition. Talking of liabilities, let's go over to the coaching world. When you are starting out, how can you know, or do you have advice on what to do first from a legal perspective? Like, is it registering yourself as a company? And if so, it's a certain type of company. What type of company? Like, where does someone start? Okay, I want to be a coach and I want to make this legit. What do I do first from a legal standpoint?
Yes. And again, this all depends, but usually I recommend filing your company, whatever that is. A lot of times it's an LLC, but there are, arguments for corporations and still just having your sole proprietorship, which is when you're just basically operating under your name. And if you're doing that, you won't have any of the liability protections, but it's easy to get started. But as a lawyer, I always recommend starting with the actual protection. So usually I'd say an LLC, but there could be, if you do want to sell shares later, or you want just kind of like more of like a liquid transition to where you can either have a partner later, just depending on your plans, you may want a corporation instead. But the most important thing I would say normally is your client contract. So I would make sure that you have a really solid client contract that you understand and that you can also explain to your clients. And this, most of the important things are like having the payment terms in there correctly, making sure that they're clear, specific, easy to understand. Your intellectual property, so protecting your actual like coaching works. So any materials that you distribute to your clients, you want them to know that it's only for their use, depending on your company. So you may have them, like you may give it to them to give to other people, but for certain materials, usually you have them just for your client to use for their business. So you want to make sure that your intellectual property terms are very clear on how they can use what and who owns what, just so they're not going out and trying to, just give it to other people. So that's one of the things. Attorney's fees provisions, it's something that you could definitely put in too, that protects you if you are sued. So even if someone sues you for something stupid, the general rule is that you have to pay for your attorney's fees and costs. But if you have these provisions in, usually what I recommend having them say is that the winning party gets to recover the attorney's fees from the losing party. And that protects you, because if you go to trial and even if you end up winning, you're still going to have to pay probably at least 50 grand in attorney's fees and cost. So that's one thing that you could put in your contract. And another thing that protects you from that is business insurance. So I would say that's if you don't have the resources yet to do your like LLC or your contract, which I still recommend doing that, because if you're investing anything in your company, your time is just as important as money. So if you're investing time, money, anything, you also should be investing in your legal to protect all of that. So, and one of the biggest things, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here, but the one thing, mindset shift for me that really changed everything for me was that like my business and me are my biggest investment and they are an investment. So once I realize that, it's like any money that I spend in my business, obviously I'm spending smartly, but it's just like, if it's going to get me to the next level, it's worth it, or it's going to protect my business. So that's where it's like, okay, some of these things you might not need right away, but I would definitely have your client contract, definitely the attorney's fees provisions, and make sure that you understand it. And then the business insurance as well.
Hey everyone, Lex here.
And M.
And if you haven't heard, we did something pretty darn cool.
We sure did. We launched a completely free community built specifically for coaches.
Say it again for the people in the back.
We launched a free community for coaches. Tell them quickly who it's for and what we're doing inside, Lex.
Sure thing. So it's for anyone from the coaching curious to side hustlers to coaches ready to scale. And through the virtual platform that we've built, we've created a safe and fun space to learn, launch, grow, connect, ideate, collaborate, vent, and evolve together.
Nailed it, Lex. Now, while it's free, you must apply in order to gain a free membership. You know, so we can make sure everyone inside is awesome, like us.
Apply today at readysetcoachcommunity.com.
Mine is up for renewal right now, so that's on my to-do list this afternoon. Thank you. I honestly didn't know about business insurance until I was like 2 years into my business, and I was at a retreat.
Common mistake too.
Yeah. I was at a retreat and the girl's like, do you have you have an event insurance, right? And I was like, no, I don't. I don't. Please don't fall on today's retreat. Thank you so much. And went out and got it.
I remember quick squirrel. I was attending a second degree society event circa some time ago. And I think I'd had to sign a waiver prior to it. It was going to be a workout class. And to get to my garage, there's these two big steps. We have like a California room, a detached garage. And I'm holding the laptop, like going to go into my garage because there's more space for working out. And I fall and sprain my ankle. And Emily's like, please don't sue me. And I'm like, well, technically it was during the event.
And technically you signed a waiver, so that worked out for the workout instructor who was smart and realized that people are classy.
I just never even made it to the workout. I just started getting to the workout.
She didn't. She's like, I'm going to the
Virtual
hospital instead. So yeah, I forgot about that. How's your ankle now?
Fine. Yeah. Anyways, okay. So great things to think about. Would a lawyer be the one who helps you with business insurance, or is that someone else?
A lawyer can help you. Usually what you would do is go to like an insurance broker, and then also just make sure that you can make sure with a lawyer that you have the right coverages and that everything in your policy is like what you want to be covered. Not everything is covered. There are like a lot of exclusions. Like for instance, with COVID, like a lot of people tried to file claims with that, and viruses were excluded in most business policies. And usually it's not something that you can add on, but there are some things that you may be able to add on that you think about that would apply to your business. So you could just pay a little extra for that protection. And generally with coaches, there usually isn't, I wouldn't think of anything that would be separate, but just depending on the type of coach, there could potentially.
What are the things that they should have covered within the business insurance in general?
Yeah, the general liability is definitely something that you need. If you have employees, you need workers' comp too. Potentially professional liability, depending on what type of coach you are. Errors and omissions insurance, which sometimes is included within a general liability, but those are definitely some of them. Oh, also, there's cyber insurance too, which you can get. Usually only covers up to a certain amount, but it's still good with all these privacy leaks. Speaking of, also, you should definitely, if you have a website or you're collecting any information from your clients online, you definitely need a privacy policy. So that's one of the things that I would say it should be first on your list too. There's a lot of things. It's a lot of information, but it's also like not as overwhelming and intimidating as it seems. You can get it all kind of done really quickly too. So depending on what lawyer you go with, most lawyers have like, I have legal planning services that you could just come to me and get most of these things done pretty quickly.
And in addition to privacy policy, typically there's usually like a terms and conditions.
Yeah, and those could be tailored in different ways. So they can be kind of like the rules set out on your website, but if you were like selling things like through your website and people, that would kind of be your contract as well. So it just depends on the type of coach. So, and how you're collecting. So if you're having them like check a box and like pay on your website, then you should have that within your terms of use, like the actual client contract.
So something that I have seen, and like transparently, Emily and I have lovingly debated within ourselves, the trend is that more and more coaches aren't passing along a physical like DocuSign contract, and rather when you're filling out maybe an application online or you're going through a form, there ends up being a part where you pause, there's a terms and conditions, and you click the box. And then that's all they're doing. I'm curious, that verse, me having my contract and sending it, am I equally protected, or like what are the pros and cons?
Generally, as long as if you have like the checkbox and then you have a link to the terms and conditions that they can click, that helps, and it is pretty much similar protection. But usually you see with the bigger companies, and I'm not 100% sure how like Stripe or any of those payment processors do it, but like if you go to a bigger company's website, they make you actually like go click through and like at least scroll through the terms and conditions. That's probably the best way to do it if you're able to do it within your website, if you're not going to do the DocuSign. But as long as you have something that says that they read the terms and conditions, it does help, and it is pretty much equal protection. But again, you know, there's ways to make sure that the more you can like ensure that they've read it, the better. But
Emily's a little smug looking right now. Am I reading that right?
No, I've got I got something in my throat. I'm sorry. We just make it so much harder sometimes than it has to be. So I'm a huge fan of simplicity and like simplifying and streamlining. And I think a lot of times like chasing people for contracts I have 2 contracts out right now. Like they paid their money, they're showing up for the thing, and they still haven't signed the contract.
yeah, you're like, wait, you need to do this. Yeah. So in that case, I would just try to do like where you have them scroll through and then click that they've read it, because then it's at least like they scrolled through it and saw it rather than just clicking it. But that's usually sufficient to say that they signed it, as long as you link to it.
Do you think there's like a certain price point involved that you recommend a contract versus like the scrolling and just accepting terms and conditions?
Not necessarily, because I don't think that, I think regardless, it's just a better protection. But if you can't do it, it's not the big, again, this is all general advice as well, but it's not always the biggest deal if you're not able to get that accessibility where you could scroll through. But for bigger price points, it's probably better just because you're more likely to come into more issues. But also people do like, depending on who it is, you might have someone who just wants to nitpick over, something smaller. So
yeah, but like an on-demand course doesn't need a contract for something that they can just pay for right then and there. Like that's
I would definitely have a contract for that, because you want to set up your intellectual property provisions in there too, just saying like, hey, this is only for your use, you can't redistribute it, and have those things in there. And then also that they, especially you also for things like that, most people don't accept refunds because it's something that they could just watch in an hour. So usually you want to have a refund policy that you're specifying like, hey, we don't give refunds on this because you get instant access to it. So that's something I would definitely have a contract for those products as well.
I have a question. Oh, go.
No, go.
Mine's a new question. So if you had a follow-up question related, go for it.
So in that though, like when you say a contract, having it with the terms and conditions accepting box is okay though.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Please approach the bench, Lexi.
Gavel, gavel, your turn. Talking stick. So my question is, okay, great. You have this client, not client. Sure. You have a client who has a contract, still works. They sign the contract, things all fine and dandy. And honestly, this has happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to many people. It's unfortunate, but the client breaks the contract. And for me, it's happened financially where they just stop paying. And I come to this point where I'm like, what do I do and what's worth it? Do I pursue legal counsel, potentially spend even more money than I'm owed fighting something, or do I just drop it? I'm curious what you would advise people. Like, at what point do you think a contract is worth pursuing when we just look at it from the financial standpoint?
And a lot of times that just depends too on the situation. So it depends on how much money it is. A lot of times, that's where a lawyer comes in too, because you could talk to them, see what happened, what you did with respect to the contract. Yeah, so it kind of depends on like the time that you put in, all the different like factors that basically what happened in the situation. And you talk to a lawyer about it. But one thing that I definitely recommend in this too, with the attorney's fees provisions, is I always put underneath it, within the attorney's fees provisions, I put another provision that just it goes hand in hand with it, but it just says that if you have to sue them for collections, that and you win, then they have to pay your attorney's fees. So it's one of those things where, yeah, you're going to have to put out money on the front end, but if you win and actually collect from them, then they have to pay you for that. So another thing that you'd want to, and this is probably getting a little bit too much for the podcast, but is you'd want to talk to an attorney about like the potential chances of you winning, how much it would potentially cost, and all those different things. So that's where just having like talking to an attorney about it and just kind of deciding on, depending on what you've done and the amount of money that's at stake.
And I think with that situation, Lex, too, I'd be curious, Colin, your point of view, if the person doesn't have any money and ran out of funds, would it make sense to go after someone who's fundless?
Exactly. So that's where in that situation, it could depend, because if they don't have funds, then you're just going to go after them and you're going to pay an attorney, and then you're not going to be able to collect. So again, it's all dependent on the situation, but having those attorney's fees provisions helps. But if they're not collectible, it's, but you should definitely have them in your contract. It's definitely something I have in every one of my contracts that I do for my clients.
That's amazing. Do you have a favorite legal signing tool that you use?
I use HelloSign, but it's just kind of within my case management software. So, and I do like it. I like it a lot.
That's the one with Dropbox, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have like a free trial that I activate every month, basically. I'm like, I'm not sending so many contracts out that I need to pay however much it is to do it.
Is there anything else from a coaching perspective? I mean, there's 5,000 things we could really get into, right, when we talk about legalities, but considering, let's say, a coach is within either they're about to start a business or they're within their early years, first 1 to 3, even to 5 years, things that you think aren't talked about enough, or things that should be on people's radar when it comes to the law and coaches.
Yeah, so some of the things I already covered, the attorney's fees provisions, the business insurance, but also trademarks. And it's something that you can wait on, but usually I don't recommend it, especially if you are, working to build the brand. Even if you just started, it's one of those things where if you're working to build a brand and you have like this great 3 years in, you have this great brand and you find out someone else was using it, then you have to go back and rebrand everything. And it's just, you have to go redo your logo, redo your name, redo your website, get a new domain name. So when you think about all of the money and time that you put into actually doing all that stuff, like it probably took you the whole 3 years to do that. So by not having a trademark, you don't own your brand. So then you have to like redo everything, and then also tell everyone, hey. So, and I know, Lex, you just went through a rebrand, but for different reasons, but you know how much work goes into it, I'm sure. So
yeah, so much fun. So much fun. Highly recommend it to everyone every 3 years.
Right. But
Um,
another thing with trademarks too is if you're not sure on your name, you don't necessarily have to go ahead and register your trademark. You can wait on that, but I would still make sure that no one else is using it so that you don't get sued for infringement. And another thing is copyrights that I think that isn't talked about a lot for coaches is actually protecting your works, especially if you have, you know, a bunch of materials like you both have. Sorry, my hand's just totally in in the camera, like, hey guys. So that's one thing where like your trademarks protect your brand name, things like that, like your company name, any of your branding elements, where your copyrights protect your actual works. So if you have like your online courses, you have videos, different materials, those are all different things that you want to copyright and protect, so that if someone is using it, that you can sue them and recover damages, especially once, well, you want to do it because if someone does infringe, you can't necessarily get damages from them after the fact if you haven't registered your copyright. So that's why it's something, it's not as much as people think. It's really not that big of an investment to just go ahead and do it. It's actually usually less than trademarking, and a lot of things you could do as a group, just depending on what it is. So that's one thing where I feel like isn't covered enough with coaches.
Wow. Okay. Well, Lex, we're gonna powwow after this episode.
No.
I know a lot of people when they start their coaching business, they feel overwhelmed with the name choosing, and oftentimes launch a coaching business using their name. So ShirleyJonesCoaching.com. What advice do you have for people using their own name versus using like a made up name?
Yeah, if you're using your name and you're building a brand and you're assuming that you want to keep your name, or even if you've used it for a while and it's really becoming synonymous with your brand, even if you have a separate name, I also recommend, just depending on the situation again, but I also usually recommend you should trademark your name
Trademark
as well.
Lexi Smith. Like I could trademark me.
Potentially, if no one else is using it for like business coaching and PR stuff.
There's a famous bread artist. Yes, I said bread as in the bread you eat, named Lexi Smith. Google it. It's fascinating. I will never beat her on SEO. It's very sad.
She's a beautiful, beautiful, talented artist. I think there was a woman, I'm probably going to mix up the story, but there was like a wedding dress designer who had a dress company that was her own name, and then she sold it and she wasn't able to use her name again. Was that what happened? Does this sound right?
I
Anyone
haven't
following?
actually heard of that one, but that happens a lot. And then, yeah, if you sell your brand, that's another thing too, where people have in the past, like, I don't know if you guys saw the, like, I don't know if it was a documentary or something, Halston on Netflix. Like, I think he sold his name to, he's like a big designer back in like the 80s,
Good one.
90s, and he sold his name to JCPenney's without really thinking about it. And then now, like, after he wasn't able to like use his name, he could still design things, but he couldn't do that. I think the same thing happened with Bobbi Brown too. She sold her name and now she works like for cosmetics. So like I think she has a separate company now that's named something else. But it's
Really?
interesting. So that's another thing too. When you are signing contracts, just make sure that you're not giving away your like intellectual property rights without meaning to.
I heard
So
the same line about Charles Shaw wine, Two Buck Chuck. Like it used to be really, really nice wine, and then it was sold to Franzia. And they used the reputation of the nice wine to create this more economical wine brand.
that's funny. I didn't know. I feel like I've heard that, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he wasn't doing well. According to Google, yeah, during bankruptcy proceedings in 1995, its trademark was acquired for $27,000 by Bronco Wine Company, owned by Fred Franzia, formerly of
Interesting.
Franzia Brothers Wines. Yeah.
But that's something too, if you do, so you can also use your trademark as an asset too. Like if you do sell your company, that's something that builds value with your company. And same thing with your copyrights too. So it's something that you can really leverage as an asset. And as your company grows and you build your brand, it does actually gain value. So, and it is a very valuable thing. Like I think Nike, I don't know if I don't remember what movie it was, but they talked about Nike, and they like he bought the logo for like $27 in like the 90s, and it's like then he trademarked it smartly, and now it's worth, it's
$1 billion.
yeah, so much money. Like can't even quantify how much it's probably worth.
So,
Oh.
Colin, this whole conversation is invaluable, but potentially very overwhelming to hear, depending on where you're at in your business. So, for today's homework, do we have something simple, a first step, one thing, like one little thing someone can do today that's listening to feel like they made a step forward in the right legal direction, what homework would you give them?
I would say go and get business insurance.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
No, we all know.
We're going to have to sidebar on that for a second after this because I don't want to make this a 40-second thing, but 40-minute thing. But I have a question for you on that. And if people have questions for you on that and other legal questions, where do they go, Colin?
You can find me on Instagram. It's Lawyer Colynn. My name's spelled Collynn. And then I have illumalaw.com. So you can book a call there as well. But you can just DM me usually.
And you also have...
She's legit, yes. So you can contact me at Lawyer Colynn on Instagram for that. And then I haven't actually launched the website yet. So, but that will be out very soon. By the time you guys air this, it probably will be out. So that will be sheslegit.com.
Next week.
Yeah. Okay. That actually will be perfect because it's ready to go. It just hasn't been launched. So
Perfect. I love the timing. Well, Colin, thank you so much for joining us as our guest today on the Set Coach.
Ready.
Oh no.
I don't know.
Podcast. Lexi's been watching too much Miss Rachel.
I love Miss
Okay.
Rachel though. She's the best.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
If you're enjoying the Ready Set Coach podcast, please leave a review wherever you are listening. For more information about Ready Set Coach, visit readysetcoachprogram.com.